The morning sunlight filtered weakly through half-drawn blinds, casting pale lines across the wooden floor of Ethan Rivera's apartment. He sat at the small dining table, a mug of coffee cooling beside his untouched breakfast. The room was quiet, too quiet, except for the ticking clock that seemed to mock the silence between him and the empty chair opposite him. Ryan had already left for work. He always did. No note, no goodbye kiss, just the fading echo of the door clicking shut. Ethan stared at the chair as if it might answer the questions that had begun to live in his chest. When did love start feeling like routine? When did us become me? The walls of their apartment carried memories, photographs from their early days together, all smiles and travel adventures. Now they looked more like ghosts of a time Ethan wasn't sure he'd ever get back. Ryan had become a man of meetings, deadlines, and late-night calls. They shared the same bed but not the same world anymore. That day began like any other until a simple notification on Ethan's phone interrupted the monotony. Your package has been delivered. He smiled faintly. He'd ordered a new sketchbook and some paints, a quiet indulgence to fill the empty evenings. But when he checked the doorstep, there was nothing there. Frowning, he scanned the hallway, no box in sight. A quick look at the delivery photo revealed the problem. His package had been dropped at 12B instead of 12A. He sighed. His new neighbor had just moved in a few weeks ago, someone he'd only glimpsed once in passing, a tall man with a camera slung over his shoulder and a confident smile. Ethan hesitated a moment before heading next door. He straightened his shirt, ran a hand through his hair, and knocked lightly. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Hey, said the man, his voice calm but warm. I was just about to come over. I think this belongs to you. He held out the small brown box. His name was written clearly on the label, Ethan Rivera. Ethan exhaled with relief. Yeah, that's mine. Thank you so much. No problem, the man said, smiling. I'm Mark. I just moved in. Looks like I've already made my first neighborly mistake. Ethan chuckled, feeling his shoulders relax. It's not your fault. The delivery guy must have mixed it up. Happens all the time. Mark leaned casually against the doorframe, studying Ethan with curious but kind eyes. Well, at least now I've met someone from the building. Everyone here's been kind of quiet. I guess we're all used to keeping to ourselves, Ethan replied. He noticed how natural their conversation felt, like he'd known Mark longer than the 30 seconds they'd spoken. Anyway, Mark said, handing him the package, hope the delivery mishap didn't ruin your day. Ethan smiled faintly. Actually, it made it a little better. For a moment, their eyes met, and Ethan felt something stir inside, a warmth he hadn't realized he'd been missing. He thanked Mark again and returned to his apartment, still holding the box but lost in thought that he placed it on the table, next to the cold coffee, and sat down. The air felt different now, lighter somehow, though he couldn't explain why. He glanced toward the window where rain had begun to fall softly against the glass. The sound was soothing, like a slow heartbeat. Hours later, when Ryan finally called, his tone was hurried. Hey, I'm staying late again. Don't wait up, okay? Sure, Ethan replied quietly. The line went dead before he could say anything more. He stared at his phone, then at the unopened package. He thought of Mark's easy laugh, the warmth in his voice. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was something subtler, more dangerous, attention. The feeling of being noticed, of being seen. That night, as Ethan sketched by the window, the rain deepened outside, turning the city into a blur of glistening lights. He caught himself thinking about the brief encounter next door, the way Mark's presence had shifted the air, the way his voice lingered in memory. That he told himself it was nothing, just a friendly neighborly moment. Yet, when he closed his sketchbook and looked at the quiet side of the bed, the truth pressed heavier against his heart. That he whispered softly to the silence, it's strange how someone you barely know can make you feel less alone. The words hung in the room like a confession he hadn't meant to speak. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, gentle, like a promise of storms yet to come, and as Ethan turned off the light, the last thing he saw was the shadow of the package still resting on the table, small, ordinary, and yet the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. Days passed with the rhythm of chores and quiet routines, yet Eli found himself lingering near Nate's farm more often, drawn by a pull he neither fully understood nor dared to name. Each morning, he greeted Nate with a nod and a tentative smile, his pulse betraying the calm he tried to wear like a cloak. Nate's presence had become an unspoken comfort, a light breaking through the orderly monotony of Eli's life. One afternoon, as the sun poured gold across the fields, Eli offered to help repair a broken gate at Nate's barn. Nate accepted without hesitation, and the two worked side by side in companionable silence. Their hands brushed occasionally, fleeting touches that left Eli's heart fluttering. He quickly withdrew his hand each time, chiding himself for feeling excitement at what was, in the eyes of their community, nothing more than ordinary work. Nate, oblivious to the depth of Eli's internal struggle, chatted casually. "You've got a good touch with wood," he said, hammering a plank into place. "Ever thought of fixing more than just fences?" There was a teasing lilt to his voice, a warmth that made Eli avert his gaze. Every word felt loaded, every glance too meaningful to ignore. Eli's mind wandered to the barn loft, to the quiet sanctuary where he had first allowed himself to admit the truth of his feelings. The memory of whispering his secret into the dim light made his chest tighten. He wondered if Nate noticed, if he understood, if anyone could ever understand. The fear of discovery gnawed at him, but the desire to be seen, to truly be known, was equally compelling. Later, as shadows lengthened across the fields, Nate suggested taking a break. They sat atop the wooden fence, legs dangling, the wind stirring the dry straw around them. Nate's expression softened, and he spoke quietly, almost as if testing the air. "Eli, sometimes I think you don't realize how much people notice you. You don't have to say anything, but I see you." Eli's breath caught. "See me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Nate nodded, his eyes calm and reassuring. "I mean, everything. How you work, how you care, how you think." There was a pause, a weight of meaning that made Eli's stomach twist with anticipation and fear. He wanted to speak, to confess, yet the walls built by years of tradition and expectation made his lips tremble with hesitation. The moment lingered, and then the distant sound of horses clipped against the dirt road, reminding Eli that the world outside their small bubble was watching. He forced a smile, careful to keep his thoughts hidden, yet the intensity of the moment remained, etched into his memory. That evening, as he returned to the barn, he felt the familiar ache of secrecy pressing against his chest, stronger than ever. In the quiet of the loft, Eli allowed himself to reflect on Nate's words. For the first time, he felt that perhaps someone understood the weight of his heart, even if they did not fully grasp the magnitude of his feelings. The barn, dim and quiet, became a refuge where he could wrestle with the duality of longing and restraint. Night fell, and Eli lingered near the stacks of hay, listening to the faint sounds of the farm settling into darkness. He thought of how fleeting these moments were, how quickly the fragile sense of closeness could dissolve under the scrutiny of their community. Yet in that precarious balance, he also felt a daring spark, a hope that something unspoken, something forbidden, could still exist between them. A creak echoed from the loft entrance. Eli's heart thumped in rhythm with the barn's silence. He froze, half expecting the shadow of a family member, half expecting Nate. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation, as if the barn itself waited for the next step, the confession, the revelation, the moment when his secret might finally meet the light. Eli drew a deep breath, steeling himself for the truth he had carried alone for so long. He knew that the next encounter, whether planned or accidental, could change everything. The barn was no longer just a place of labor, it had become the stage for a story that had been quietly unfolding, one that demanded honesty, courage, and the risk of being fully seen. The barn was quiet, bathed in the golden haze of late afternoon sunlight filtering through narrow slats. Eli perched atop a stack of hay, hands gripping the rough straw, his heart pounding as if it might betray him at any moment. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, yet the words still felt fragile, almost impossible to speak. A soft creak of the barn door drew his attention. Nate stepped inside, boots scuffing the wooden floor lightly, carrying a small bundle of tools. The familiar sight made Eli's pulse quicken, every instinct screamed at him to retreat, yet he remained rooted to the spot. Nate's gaze met his, steady and patient, as if he could sense the turmoil beneath Eli's calm exterior. I need to say something, Eli began, voice barely above a whisper. His fingers fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve, betraying his nerves. Something I've kept inside for too long. Nate set the tools down and leaned against the barn doorframe, giving Eli the space he needed. You don't have to be afraid, he said softly. I'm listening. Eli drew a deep breath, eyes fixed on the dusty floorboards. I feel things I shouldn't. Feelings I don't know how to explain. For you, Nate. The words stumbled out, hesitant but real, trembling with years of fear and longing. He finally lifted his gaze, meeting Nate's eyes directly for the first time. I've been silent for so long, but I can't anymore. Nate's expression softened, a gentle smile breaking across his face. He stepped closer, careful to respect the invisible boundaries of both space and tradition. Eli. I feel the same. I've noticed you for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it either. There was no shame in his tone, only quiet understanding, relief and fear mingled inside Eli, a heady mix that left him momentarily breathless. The barn, once a place of solitary labor, had transformed into a sanctuary of confession and fragile hope. He felt the weight of secrecy lighten, if only slightly, as if speaking aloud had shifted the world's gravity, yet even in that tender moment, Eli was aware of the risk. The Amish community watched closely, and discovery could mean judgment, scorn, or worse. His mind flickered to Miriam, to the neighbors, to the rules that had shaped every moment of his life. But for the first time, the desire to be true to himself outweighed the fear of consequence. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been buried for years. Each word strengthened their connection, building a bridge across the chasm of fear and expectation. There were no grand gestures, no physical declarations, only the quiet intimacy of two souls recognizing each other. Nate's presence felt like an anchor, steadying Eli's storm-tossed heart. As twilight descended, Eli walked to the edge of the loft, gazing out at the fields glowing in the fading light. Nate joined him silently, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The world beyond the barn continued in its predictable rhythm, but within these walls, time seemed suspended. Eli realized that love, complicated, quiet, forbidden, could exist even in the smallest, most hidden corners. The creak of a distant cart reminded them of reality, of duties and routines waiting beyond the barn. Eli took a deep breath, grounding himself. I don't know what will happen, if anyone finds out, he admitted. But I know I can't ignore this anymore. Nate nodded, understanding the weight of his words. We'll be careful, he said. But we'll also be honest with ourselves, and that matters more than anything else. Eli's heart swelled with a mixture of fear and hope. The barn had become more than a sanctuary, it was a symbol of courage, of honesty, and of the fragile beauty of connection. He smiled softly, feeling the quiet triumph of finally being seen, fully and unconditionally. As they packed up the tools and prepared to leave, Eli cast one last glance around the loft. The hay smelled faintly of sunlight and dust, the air carried the faint echo of whispered confessions, and the wooden board seemed to hum with a secret of their own. For Eli, the world would never be the same, yet in that change, he felt alive in a way he never had before.